Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Volta TST. As usual, thanks for joining. The call is public and recorded and will be shared live on YouTube, so please be mindful of the comments you make and the information you share with the team. So first up, there is a little bit of an announcement of the microservice controller. I forgot to swap this around from Raj in the Radisys group. So Raj, please go ahead.
Hey, Andrea, thank you. Rest of the team, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Sorry, I'm on my phone because I have a couple of calls running, Andrea. One of the things we wanted to do today was to give you all a quick update on where we are with the LWC discussion, if I may. First, we are going to be providing a LWC executable on March 15th, which is exactly a week from today. And the idea is to provide that and a small cheat sheet to go along with it on, if I may, the APIs and how to use it. And that was one update I wanted to provide for the whole team. Andrea, I know, I guess you have the primary interest to wanting to take this and kick the tires or test it out. So yep. we will give it to you and anybody else on the community that is interested. We will work through the semantics of how we actually deliver that over to you guys here in the next few days. Okay, so that's
absolutely. Thanks, Raj. Let's work it out offline. There's a couple of options we can take. One is Docker pullable and documenting the drive. That's probably the easiest one. There are a few others. But let's work on it offline, so we share it on the next TST. It's great news. Great news. Thanks a lot.
You're quite welcome. And the other thing I also want to communicate here is that I know we had a discussion with Netsia and DT and some of you folks who are at LWC. So we took some of the requirements from other community members into consideration, and at this stage, we are currently thinking of actually even adding, putting out our IGMP implementation along with our LWC, if I may, for the community. And then, of course, that is an implementation that we have just started, and we will give what we have, and then if there is any further enhancement that need to be done for any particular workflow or what have you use case, then. Obviously, the community is very welcome too, and we will be there as well along with the community. So these are the two key things I wanted to share with the community here today. Okay.
Thanks, Raj. Again, this is great news. I will make sure to send this to the Netsia team and the Turk Telecom folks as well. And eager to look on your implementation. I've seen a glimpse of it and looks very good. So looking forward to that.
Awesome. Okay, that is it for me. Short and simple.
Thanks, Raj. Much appreciated.
Okay, back to you.
Thanks. Okay, so next up, a little bit of design update on little bit of an update on FTTB. We did merge the OpenOLT adapter patch. We did merge the OpenOLT patch, and we did merge the first of the two OpenONU Go patches. We have tested the OLT and the SADIS app for the management traffic, so the management and ANCP traffic. The provisioning, the implementation is good. And it works. The subscriber traffic, it's still a work in progress. We did find some things that needed to be improved, and we discussed them with Amit and Abhilash, and I think we are in very good shape. We also found a small change that needed to be done in BBSIM, and that has also been done by Elia. I don't know, Amit, Abhilash, Elia, do you want to add anything on this topic?
No, Andrea, you have summarized everything.
Okay. I don't expect any major change to come up. There is still one OpenONU patch that will need to go in for this FTTB, and then some end-to-end testing that will be done first manually by us at ONF, and then we will create a system tests at least for the sanity for it to be used with the FTTB implementation. We still have to find a way. That's maybe an offline discussion for me and you, Amit, on how to best provide an image or a way to disable the DHCP-L2 relay app and not having it active since the beginning. So that's something that maybe we can take offline, Amit, and we have to discuss.
Yeah, sure, Andrea.
Okay. There was also that issue, or I mean, announcements that we have. The announcement that we have to make for the set VLAN. Do you want to give us like a sentence on that, Amit? So everybody knows that we have to make that change.
Yeah, so as of now, in the RW core, right, we don't have option of like doing an add VLAN and a set VLAN. So this was okay till now because we always, in all our workflows, we were like adding and removing VLANs. So that was okay. But with FTTB, we have a use case where instead of adding a VLAN to the packet, right, we are modifying the VLAN on the packet. So now we need to use both the options. So that change will be needed in the RW core. So the change in the RW core is not much, it's a simple change. But and a corresponding change would be needed in the OLT app as well, where we have to do set VLAN and add VLAN specifically for the use cases.
Okay, thanks, Amit. Yeah, I mean, that behavior is always what we did. It's just that it was assumed that we were doing so. And instead, we now need to make it more explicit, and that's effectively how we do it. The core removes that translation during the decomposition, and we put it into the OLT app. So just for everybody to be aware of that. Okay, this is good news. Again, we are in very good shape. But the big item that I wanted to discuss today, that I feel that is that's worth a discussion here in the TST, is the combo PON support. We have a document that is here. We started an implementation within BBSIM. The implementation within BBSIM has been merged, and we now have the capability to expose different ranges of ports, in the sense that before we already had the capability to publish ranges of ports within the Voltha system, but BBSIM always reported all of the ports within the same range and the same technology. So either GPON or XGS-PON. Now we have the support to do like 2 ports of GPON and 2 ports of XGS-PON being reported to Voltha, and Voltha is capable of handling those with no issue. We have not seen any issues at the moment with some tests that have been put in and have been tested by EMEA. But the big question is how to support it on the OpenOLT agent and on the OpenOLT boxes in general. And maybe Girish, do you want to take it from here?
Sure, Andy. Can you share me?
Yes.
Oh, I can share the screen.
Okay, I'll let you share then.
Okay. So this is the design doc for combo and AnyPON. So before we go into some of the implementation details, so these are the requirements that we have assumed for combo and AnyPON support. So the first one is the OLT should be able to come up with a PON-tech configuration as described in a configuration file. So this is basically a static configuration. So, and the second requirement is OLT should support dynamic configuration. I mean, not all OLTs might support dynamic configuration, but if an OLT is able to support dynamic configuration, then such a capability should be exposed to the outside world. And Volta and DMI API should provide a mechanism for such dynamic configuration. The third one is the PON-tech. If the PON-tech is dynamically reconfigured, the OLT should record such configurations on the non-volatile memory so that it could be reapplied on OLT reboots. And the fourth one is, for some reason, if the OLT could not apply the PON-tech configuration change, then it should appropriately indicate the caller who invokes that API to dynamically reconfigure, so that a corrective action could be taken care. That is basically to reconfigure the PON-tech to a previous working configuration. And the fifth one is, I can go into more details about this later, but it should be possible to query the PON-tech logical to physical port mapping for combo PON, if applicable, for Volta, DMI, and non-PON APIs. And I think the sixth one is, Andre, this is what you added. If Volta OLT offers APIs to understand the type of transceiver plugged into the PON port, those should be used to dynamically, I think that should be used to read the PON-tech instead of using the static configuration, right? I think that's what you meant from this.
Yes, yes, indeed. So if there is a way for the OLT, either being the the white box OLT, possibly via ONLP, or other types of OLT to dynamically reconfigure this, it should be made possible within our code base and our system.
Mm-hmm. And does this supersede both 1 and 2 or just 1? I mean,
I don't think it supersedes. I think it's side by side. So I think we should support configuration. We should support dynamic reconfiguration, and it should support live plug and play of the transceiver. Obviously, we could think of the order of these in the sense that which one takes precedence over the other. To me, the hardware is always right. So if you configure something and then you plug in a different transceiver, either we stop everything and just throw a huge warning, a huge error, or we go for the hardware is right, and I'm gonna say it's XGS PON, even if you told me it's GPON. But I think that is a question for maybe a little bit of a later time.
okay.
It could also be made configurable in the sense this is the ordering of precedence. But as I said, to me, the hardware takes precedence.
Okay. For everyone, I have not considered this requirement in the implementation details. Yeah, this is something that I need to think about and also seek feedback from the community. But other than, go ahead.
And I believe that is fine. I think we should start with 1 and 2, so that we have a working solution that is usable, and that is a first step in this direction. And then, given that this is a little bit more complicated and would entail, I think, a little bit more caveats around how we implement it, we could definitely do in a further step. It doesn't have to be an all or nothing, but that's what I'm saying. So even the design can come in the upcoming weeks.
Andrea, I have a question right there. Where would these discussions be handled? I know this is the Volta TST call. I am assuming that the discussion for the combo PON, for functionality, and any PON will probably be done in a brigade or in a separate working group, smaller working group, or will it be done here in the Voltha TST calls? And the reason I'm asking is because I want to see who from Red Assist can also join and help contribute here.
So I think that we can keep the discussion here and have a dedicated maybe exchange of emails or Slack channel if need be for offline topics, and then we can discuss it here. I think this TST is the place.
Okay, got it.
Unless somebody else feels differently, but I believe we can do it here. There is really no need. In the future, maybe some low-level implementation could be done in a separate ad hoc calls. But I think that as far as right now, and even with this discussion of the dynamic plug-and-play elements, I think we can do it here.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah,
thanks, Raj.
I agree with that. I mean, when we go to low-level implementation details, like doing something with BAL on the OpenVLT agent, we have a BAL brigade, but that is for now. We are not having that because we don't have much work on that. But when that is needed, I can revive the BAL brigade meetings for some OLT agent BAL specific implementations. Sounds
good, Ganesh. Okay.
So no, I'll stop here for a bit. So do people have any questions on the requirements? Are there something? Am I missing something, or something needs some more clarification?
Just on the dynamic configuration, we are still targeting it, the dynamic configuration, or it's still under discussion?
We are still targeting it. I mean, I have some detailed notes down below. We are targeting that, yes.
Okay. When you said dynamic without OLT going for a reboot, right?
Yes. For example, for instance, the Aspen Broadcom chip supports dynamic configuration of pawns. So when such OLT MAC devices support it, I think the Voltha or DMI NB API should support such dynamic configuration. Yes.
Okay.
And we are targeting.
I believe the outcome would still be a port up, port down, but not a full OLT reboot. Is that correct, Girish?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the users on that PON port obviously are going to have impact on service, but the other PON ports, yeah, the OLT is not going to reboot.
OLT is not going to reboot. And to be honest, I don't believe they're going to be users, because if you're changing the technology, you would have to have unplugged all the use of an old technology and have a new one there. So I don't believe they're going to be users, but the effect to the system and upper layers will still be a port up, port down.
There could be users, Andrea, because take the use case where an operator deploys the combo PON OLT, but with GPON optic only, because they don't want to invest the XGS PON or a combo PON optic, the cost of that optic, if I may, until 2-3 years from now, at which point you would have subscribers on that PON, if I may, on that port with the GPON optic. If and when it requires a combo PON support down the road, then there will have to be sort of a maintenance window, maybe a large one, or a large, and where we have to do quickly. And this is where I think we need to figure out is how do you change the underlying PON port configuration without having to undo all the services and subscribers and redo. Because the very use case is to go with GPON and 2 years later put CPON or optic.
So that's a very good point, Raj. From the configuration perspective, all the way to effectively the OLT adapter, we do not have any knowledge of PON technology. So in theory, what you could do is unplug the optic, it goes port down, the subscribers are still provisioned, you plug back the optic with
a new optic, the CPON optic, right?
A new optic, and the new ports come up, and if the subscriber identifier stays the same, it will be automatically pushed. The configuration will be automatically repushed, so the flows, and that would entail automatic service provisioning. The one thing that came to my mind at this point is that I do identify the subscriber based in SADIS, for example, based on the ONU serial number. And that might be a little bit of an issue because that serial number will change.
Why would that change? I mean, if you had a GPON ONU on a GPON transceiver tree,
yes,
and you plug in a combo PON, the GPON ONU would still be functional.
that's correct.
Okay, if we keep the same ONU, then yes. But if you switch the subscriber to an XGS PON ONU, for example, in that case, then it will change.
So
Yeah,
okay, got it. So there are two. I'm sorry for splitting hairs, but I think this is important to discuss this at this stage. Andrea, one is the use case that you mentioned, but the use case that we were thinking, at least I was thinking about, was that when you go from G to combo PON optic on the CPON OLT, it would be because initially you only have residential subscribers and that is all you have. And then suddenly, they put a big, tall, shiny building, and then there are, 10 floors, and there are, 20 businesses, and now you have to support, 1 gig, 10 gig, 5 gig, whatever, business services, or maybe even a high-end community that needs XGS PON. My point is that all the GPON subscribers, again, it's not set in stone. Some of those GPON subscribers could move to XGS PON. That is the use case you're talking about, and in which case the ONT-ID would change. But then it would also move, I guess, in the virtual port, because it would now show up on a different PON port, right? Even though it's physically the same, the virtual port is XGS and not G. So it's almost like the old subscriber went away on G, and a new subscriber, even though it is the same subscriber, same address, so to speak, but there is a new subscriber now on the X wavelength. That is one use case. And the other use case is that you have a whole bunch of new subscribers just coming on board.
Yes, indeed. Then if we keep the same ONU, the subscriber could be repushed. If we change ONU, then we change the whole subscriber provisioning. You need to reprovision
completely from scratch, so to speak, because they are now, the same address, for example, has moved from either X to G, or you now have a new physical address that is just coming on the G wavelengths or the G virtual port. I'm sorry, the X virtual port instead of the G port, if I may, right? Virtual port.
Yes.
I don't know if my language is making sense for everybody or not, but when I say virtual port, what I mean by that, right? You all understand that? Okay.
Yeah, to me, it does. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So we should be able to support this use case.
Right. Thanks for the discussion. Any further questions?
No, Girish, no, that's all for me.
Okay, then let me go to the next section. So based on the requirements that we assumed, apart from the last one that Andrea added, so it basically entails, these three large work items. One is the static configuration of PONTEC. The other is the dynamic configuration of PONTEC. And the third one is the northbound API changes to report PONTEC logical to physical port mapping for combo PON, if applicable. So next, coming to supporting static configuration of PONTEC. So we came up with the following YAML template that basically defines the PON ID ranges and the technology that particular PON port supports, and the resource ID ranges for that PON ID range. So in this case, the start and end is the same in our example, but you could have a range of more than one PON ports having the same tech. Yeah, this is a pretty simple YAML format, and this is preloaded to the OLT. And when the OLT agent starts, it basically reads this YAML file, and based on the PONTEC that is configured for that PON ID range. It just basically configures those PON ports with this technology, and then reports the resource ranges that are reported, that are configured for that PON ID range to the OpenOLT adapter. And then the OpenOLT adapter just basically, configures the resource pool with this particular resource ranges. Yeah, I mean, there are some.
Sorry, Girish, I have a question on the previous section.
Mm-hmm.
So just to understand this better, so when you say the PON ID range, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you have example of 0 and 1. So for a 16 port OLT, 16 physical ports, right? So will this range be from 0 to 15?
Yes, it is 0 indexed, yes.
Okay, so here each index is a physical port.
Yes.
Okay, so
no, not physical. It is basically a port. It is basically a port on the Mac device. So what happens in case of, I wanted to go into that detail a little later, but since you asked, so the way combo PON is realized on most standard OLTs that I have talked to, Broadcom or Atran. I haven't talked to others, but looking on the internet as well, the way combo PON tech is realized as you have 2 PON ports on the Mac device, and these 2 PON ports are multiplexed to a single external facing PON port. So internally, these are 2 different PON ports, supporting the same tech or different tech, but externally it is visible as a single PON port. So what agent or the adapter sees is the ports on the Mac device, but what the user, operations guy sees outside is just single PON port. So on this PON port, you connect the combo PON transceiver, and now you have both GPON and XGS PON users on the same PON tree. Now, if you configure this external facing PON port as combo PON, you have both XGS PON and GPON tech, for example, on that PON tree. But if you configure this as any PON with the PON tech as GPON, you just have GPON users, or if you configure this as any PON with XGS PON, you just have XGS PON users on this PON port. Now, when you configure this PON port as any PON, internally, only one of these PON ports is actually enabled. Say, for example, you have 0 and you have PON port 0 and PON port 1 on the Mac device. And these are multiplexed to external facing PON port, say 0. And you configure the external facing PON port as any PON, only PON 0 is enabled on the Mac device. PON 1 is not used at all, it is not enabled. I hope I was able to convey the idea here.
Yeah. So that would mean that for a 16 port OLT, this range would go from 0 to 31.
Yes, I mean, if it's a combo PON OLT, yes.
Okay, thanks.
One more clarification, Girish. Based on the configuration, I can have PON ports reported by the device like 0, and it can skip 1 and directly go to 2, 3, correct? Because
yes, then that PON port should not be enabled. Yes.
Yes, correct. Okay. So when I'm enabling a PON port, it has to be, suppose it's a combo PON, so it'll have both PON ports and both should be enabled, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, the agent has to do all the validations that are relevant for that particular platform. So if you configure PON 0 as, yeah, I mean, in this case, in this particular example, this is treat, I mean, in case of, OLTs based on Aspen, Broadcom Aspen chip, I mean, this actually is a combo PON. These 0 and 1 are actually multiplexed to an external facing PON port, and that is a combo PON port, and you should have a combo PON transceiver, otherwise, of course, it will not work.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, there are some low-level details here. I mean, you should basically have the configuration file at a specific path, and that could be a default path that the agent looks at, or you could also make that configurable for the agent application. And the agent should validate that the configuration file is valid and could be applied on that particular platform. Otherwise, it should just throw a fatal error and just become inactive and inoperational, and the user has to take some action on that. And the agent already reports, supports reporting resource ranges on a per PON port level. So there is no specific changes required to the OpenOLT proto in this aspect.
One question, Girish, how are we reporting the common resources like flow IDs? Will they still come under resource ranges? Like
the flow IDs are
by
the flow IDs are not currently managed by the agent. The OpenOLT adapter uses its own flow IDs, Voltha flow IDs. And those Voltha flow IDs are passed on to the agent, and agent generates its own flow IDs that are used by BAL. So agent maintains a mapping of Voltha flow ID to BAL flow ID. When I say BAL, I'm talking using Broadcom-based utilities, but any other OpenOLT that uses some other underlying platform should use a mapping between Voltha flow ID and its platform flow ID.
Okay, got it. Because earlier that was being reported as well, probably. Yeah, got it.
Yeah, you're right. I think some 2 or 3 releases back, we did away with managing flow IDs.
Okay.
Any further questions? Okay, so let me go to the next subsection as well. So those OLTs that do not support dynamic configurations, so the way to change the PONTEC is you upload the new static configuration file to the OLT. It could be out of plan. I mean, Voltha doesn't manage how this is passed to the OLT, but the user somehow loads this new static configuration to the OLT and just reboots. And the OLT will come up with a new PONTEC. Yeah, of course, this affects services on all PON ports, even for those PON ports whose technology has not really changed. Any questions? Okay, so let me go to the dynamic configuration of PONTEC. So dynamic configuration of PONTEC allows changing of PONTEC for one or more PON ports on the OLT without impacting services on other PON ports. So this, I don't know if this is big enough for everyone to see. Let me try to enlarge this. Is this clear to everyone?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks. So these are the, I have oversimplified this, for instance, the OLT adapter is directly talking to owners, but I have bypassed a lot of other components here, but I hope that's clear. So these are the entities in the sequence diagram. We have DMI client, a DMI server, OLT process, OLT agent, OLT adapter, and owners. The DMI server, OLT process, and OLT agent are actually running in the OLT, and the rest are outside the OLT box. The first thing that the DMI client does is, okay, so this is the assumption. So we wanted to keep the PONTEC management out of the purview of Voltha and let DMI do that job. I think in our opinion, Voltha was not the right place to manage PONTEC. So the DMI client initiates the disable PON request, and So that the server passes on that OLT process, the PON port is disabled. So as soon as the PON port is disabled, a PON interface down is indicated to the agent, which then passes on to the adapter. Following the PON port down, you see a series of ONU down for all the ONU server active on that PON port. And consequently, you also see a UNI port down reported to ONOS. So then the ONOS removes all the flows, which then translates to removing the flows on the OLT, the schedulers, queues, everything is cleaned, even the resources are released. Now looking at this, I think I missed one critical step. So after you're done with this, you have to replace the PON transceiver on the OLT to the appropriate. If you're moving from GPON to XGS PON or to combo PON, you connect the appropriate transceiver on the OLT. And then you enable the PON with the new tech. The OLT PON is enabled. So in case it's a success, you receive a PON interface up. So on PON interface up, it has to indicate the new resource ranges and the new tech to the OLT adapter so that it can initialize the resource pools for that PON port. And then the ONU discoveries are received, they're activated, the UNI port is up at ONOS, flow, schedulers, queues, everything is configured again on the OLT. And everything looks fine. So in case it's a failure, the DMI agent, the DMI client has to take some corrective action, and the most basic action is to just revert back to the old PON tech. That was functional before. There are some low-level details here. I won't go into much detail here, but one important aspect that I wanted to mention here is the interface operation indication on the OpenOLT proto needs these new changes. Basically, when it sends the interface operation indication up, it has to indicate the PON tech. The PON tech updated basically says that the technology was updated and what's the new technology and the new PON resource ranges. So this would this flag would basically indicate the OpenOLT adapter to reinitialize the resource pools with the new resource ranges. Any questions?
Girish, can you please go back to the resource, the range thing that you had? I just want to make sure that my understanding is correct. No, up, please. Where we had the PON IDs.
You mean the sequence diagram or the?
No, above that. Where you had the static configuration with the PON IDs?
Okay.
Yeah. So say we have 3 physical ports on the box, right? Say 0, 1, and 2. And port 0, physical port 0 has a combo transceiver. Physical port 1 has a any transceiver, say GPON. And physical port 2 has again a combo transceiver. So here we will have PON ID 0, 1, and then 2. There won't be a 3, and then 4, 5. Am I correct?
Sorry, I just lost you for a bit. Can you repeat the question?
So we have 3 physical ports, right? 0, 1, 2. First one, 0 has a combo transceiver. Second one has any transceiver, say a GPON transceiver, and the third one again has a combo transceiver. So the configuration here, the static configuration here should be 0, 1.
Yes.
And then 2. There will be no 3. And then 4 and 5.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And if we were to change the 2 to, so the physical port 1, which is represented as PON ID 2, right? So say that is operating in GPON mode. There is a GPON transceiver. And we want to replace the GPON transceiver with the XGS PON transceiver.
Yes.
Right. Then the sequence diagram that you show below, there the interface indication would be for PON ID 2. First, it will be a down. And then after the change of the transceiver, again, it will be PON ID 2 only,
Yes.
the interface up.
No. I mean, that depends on the OLT model. I think in Aspen chip, I remember that, you know, only the even ports can be configured as XGS PON and odd ports can be configured as GPON in case of a combo and any PON. I mean, it depends on the implementation. So
Yeah, you're right, Girish, actually.
So
It's
So
on
if-
odd and even basis.
yeah, so if that is the case, then we might have a small problem down in the sequence diagram, because when you change from say GPON to XGS PON, the PON interface down would be for PON ID 2. And the next PON interface up will be for PON ID 3. So the port with PON ID 2 would have been created in RW core, and that will linger on there.
I see your point.
Yeah, it should not be a problem, but ideally it should get cleaned up. Or we should have all the possible ports always there at RW core or at Volta. And depending on what is the real transceiver that is plugged in, only those ports are active.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think I had asked this question in the document, but I think somewhere between the versions of the document, I think it got lost somewhere.
Oh yes, sorry about that. I completely rehauled the document, and yeah, I might have missed some comments.
Yeah, I think it got missed somewhere there. So yeah, if you could look into that aspect, I think that will also help.
Yeah, let me make a note of that. That's a good point. You know, let me think about how to address that. If it's a problem or not, if it's a problem, how that could be addressed. Yeah, thanks, Amit. Any further questions? Okay, then I'll go to next section. This is based on the 3 broad level work items that I envisaged, and this is the last part, you know, exposing combo PON information via DMI northbound APIs. So basically, there is an API called hardware component info get request, and in the info response, there is a component attribute, and the component attribute has a port component attributes message. Here we need to add a few more information elements. One is the PON-tech config, which basically indicates the PON-tech configuration for that particular port. I mean, if this is relevant only if the port type is a PON port, and it basically has the PON-tech, and is it part of a combo PON set, and what is the physical PON interface ID for that particular PON port. Yeah, that is all. I think this would be useful for operations guys, because all this mostly they see the external facing PON port, so it would be useful for them to know the given logical PON port maps to which particular physical PON port on the OLT.
Yeah, Girish, I would have some comments on this one. Maybe I can talk to you offline also. I don't know if we have enough time right now. But given that this is a port, right? And in the DMI interface, you basically have like a tree structure for an entire device. So generally the port would be a child of a transceiver.
Okay.
Okay. So when 2 ports are part of a combo, right, they would be children of the same transceiver.
Okay.
So is part of a combo PON set may not be needed.
Okay.
Right. You can find your sibling. You find a sibling means yes, you are part of a combo. Right. So yeah, we could look into some of those things. And the physical pawn interface ID. This is something as in how do we use this value?
This could be useful to identify the actual pawn port, external facing pawn port on the OLT. Right. I just put this because there was another reviewer, I forgot the name. There was a request to get this information and could be useful for operations guys. So I just added this. I don't know if I didn't get a feedback after I added this, so I need to talk to that reviewer again to see if this is what was meant.
Yeah,
if it made sense.
Yeah, so we already have some. I don't know if that is what would match the requirement, because I'm not getting the exact requirement, because the transceiver, right, would be present in a container again through the structure, right? And that container at some point in the structure, right, if it is a cage, right, where the transceiver is plugged in, should have a physical label as well. As in the provision is there. And if it is populated properly by the DMI client, right, and sorry, by the DMI server, if it populates it correctly, then that would give an indication of physically where this port is. But I don't know if the requirement is that or the requirement is something else.
Okay, so let's take this. I mean, it's not clear to me as well. So let's take this discussion, in the next EST call, and I try to gather more information from you and other reviewers.
Yeah. Let's continue on this thing later on.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, then. So I think what makes more sense, given all the requirements and some of these implementation details, is to implement all this in a phased manner, starting with BBSIM. And thanks to Elia, we have a first implementation of the BBSIM to starting with the static configuration that I just talked about. It's already up. And I think it's working fine, Elia. And is that correct?
Yeah, it's up. If no configuration file is provided, it falls back to the regular behavior of BBSIM, but with one of these YAML files, it configures the pawn ranges as requested, and it has been tested.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, that is all. And once we have the combo pawn OLTs and the combo pawn transceivers, I think the real work on the hardware could actually begin. And that's going to take some time. I think the OLTs that we have is any pawn, as far as we got the confirmation from Radisys. And we have a Radisys OLT. I think that's any pawn OLT. So I think for ONF, the first thing would be to get a combo pawn OLT and then some combo pawn transceivers, and then we can begin some real.
So, Girish, there is a combo pawn, which is not OpenOLT based, which is the Adtran one. So we should also reach out to them to see how you could configure it on their system. And definitely, given that we have plans to implement this on the DMI, they will have to make changes to their DMI agent to be capable of configuring this. So one of the next steps we need to do, and Amit, we need to bring this to the device management interface brigade to make sure that is approved in the design as it is right there, as Girish pointed out. So I'll make a note to myself to bring this into the next DMI call.
And where would those DMI calls be handled? Sorry for asking a simple question.
Oh, this is again it's on the public cord calendar. They're public. They're recorded. It's the same as the TST, just it's another call,
Okay.
and that is just to discuss the structure of the DMI interface. It's not the OpenOLT agent implementation. The OpenOLT agent implementation will still be discussed here, or as Girish pointed out, in possibly a bar brigade call when and if that will arise
Okay.
again.
Got it. Okay.
So that is the next step for the DMI. For the combo, we're definitely interested in getting our hands on one of the Radisys one, the C. I know also EdgeCore is working or has a working solution. I don't know to which extent it works with OpenOLT agent. We would have to talk to them as well. And I also know that Zyxel, which we are working closely with for their SDA platform, if I recall correctly the name, also that one is a combo OLT. So we're working with a few partners to have OLTs, combo OLTs that we can work with to test this. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, thanks, Andrea. That is all I had to discuss. Unless there are any questions, I'm done from my side.
And I believe we're pretty much on the top of the hour. So what I would suggest is for everybody to go and take a look at this document from Girish and provide some feedback to him. If you have any thoughts, please do push them out, email, and everything as usual. We will talk about it again, possibly next week, maybe after the controller presentation and the sharing of the cheat sheet from Radisys. We'll see how it plays. I would suggest Girish, you keep us updated and make those changes that you have discussed during this meeting, and some of the feedback, incorporate some of the feedback from this meeting, and then we can. I'll bring it up in the DMI and make sure that is also discussed over there and it's agreed upon, and we can then proceed further from there. Make sense?
Sounds good.
Okay, so thanks everybody. So looking forward to your presentation next week. Raj, I'll schedule it as first topic of the meeting so you can push up the info about the LWC and how to test it out. And then if there are any updates to this document, I can also put that on Girish.
Okay.
We can play it by ear.
Okay.
Thanks everybody, and have a great rest of your day. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.